The air hangs thick with the reek of charred timber and smoldering flesh. You stand at the edge of the Vatican gardens, the summer night pressing in like a shroud. Torches flicker, but these are no ordinary flames they writhe. Human forms, slick with oil, twist against their stakes, their cries swallowed by the roar of the crowd. A young woman, her skin pale as marble under the moon, steps forward into the circle of light. She is stripped bare, her body a canvas of defiance amid the humiliation. The emperor watches from his chariot, eyes gleaming like polished obsidian. "Dance for us," he commands, his voice a silken blade. She refuses. The pitch is poured, the spark falls, and Rome illuminates its own darkness. But this is no mere spectacle. It's the birth of a machine oiled by fear, fueled by blame, designed to consume not just bodies, but the very spark of belief that dared to challenge the eternal city. What follows is a descent into one of history's most calculated cruelties. The events we'll uncover involve public executions, forced degradations, and the systematic erasure of a fledgling faith. These are documented horrors from ancient accounts, meant to expose the gears of power, not to revel in the pain. If the weight feels too heavy, pause here. For those who stay, we'll trace the threads not to shock, but to understand how one man's paranoia ignited an empire's shadow. This wasn't random madness. This was a system at work, an emperor cornered by whispers, a city starved for vengeance, and a minority faith caught in the blaze. In the sweltering July of 64, when flames devoured 10 of Rome's 14 districts, Nero didn't just rebuild. He remade the world in his image, starting with the innocent. The stakes, survival for the ruler, silence for the ruled. And echoing through centuries, a question. How does power turn neighbors into kindling? What we'll see is no isolated tyrant. It's the blueprint of blame, timeless, terrifying, and all too familiar. Rome in the mid-first century was a colossus teetering on its own grandeur. Stretching from the misty coasts of Britannia to the sun-baked sands of Egypt, the empire cradled 60 million souls under a single purple banner. Its heart pulsed in the eternal city, a labyrinth of 7 hills, where marble forums gleamed beside teeming slums of timber tenements. Narrow alleys choked with merchant stalls, aqueducts thundered overhead, and the Tiber slithered like a vein of forgetfulness. Emperors ruled not by divine right alone, but by the Senate's nod and the legion's steel, a delicate dance of flattery and force. Yet beneath the triumphs lay fractures. Taxes bled the provinces dry to fund bread and circuses for the masses. Senators schemed in shadowed porticos, eyeing the throne like wolves at a feast. And in the underbelly, new voices stirred, whispers of a carpenter from Judea, executed decades earlier under Pontius Pilate, whose followers now gathered in hidden rooms. They called themselves Christians, a sect born of hope, not conquest. They shared bread in memory of their teacher, refused the incense to Caesar's genius, and preached a kingdom not of this world. To Romans, they were oddities at best, arsonists at worst, a superstition that mocked the gods and threatened the social glue. The tension simmered like oil on a flame. Emperors before had tolerated Jews, even protected them from riots. But Christians, they blurred lines, Jews yet not, slaves yet free in spirit, poor yet rich in promise. By 64, their numbers in Rome numbered perhaps a few thousand, bakers, slaves, widows, tucked into the city's folds. They posed no army, no treasury, just words that lingered like smoke. Enter Nero Claudius Caesar Augustus Germanicus. Born Lucius Domitius Ahenobarbus in the salty air of Antium, 3 years into the reign of mad Caligula, his father, a brutish consul named Gnaeus, spat venom even at his son's birth. From Agrippina and me, nothing good can come. Gnaeus died soon after, leaving the boy to his mother's iron grip. Agrippina, the younger great-grandniece of Augustus, sister to Caligula, widow of the stuttering Claudius, was a force forged in scandal. Exiled once for plotting, she clawed back. Poisoning whispers say, her way to power. She molded her son into clay. Tutors drilled him in rhetoric, lyre, and the arts, while she whispered of destiny. Rule or be ruled, she'd say, her eyes like daggers. Nero's early years were a storm of shadows. At 11, adopted by the doddering Claudius, he watched his new stepfather fumble the empire. Agrippina pulled strings, sidelining Claudius's own son, Britannicus. When Claudius choked on mushrooms in 54, another accident, Nero, just 16, donned the laurels. The boy emperor promised renewal, lower taxes, honest governors, a golden age. Crowds cheered as he doled grain from the granaries, staged lavish games in the Circus Maximus. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher, turned advisor, and Burrus, the iron-fisted Praetorian prefect, reined him in. For 5 years, it worked. Roads stretched further, frontiers held firm. But the machine hummed beneath. Nero craved the stage literally. He fancied himself Apollo reborn, strumming the lyre while chariots thundered. Senators sneered, the mob adored. Agrippina loomed larger, her influence a chain. In 59, he snapped. A boat malfunctioned on Lake Nemi, drowning her, or so the tale goes. Freed, Nero spiraled. He divorced his plain wife Octavia for the fiery Poppaea, kicking her to death in a fit when pregnant. Britannicus, poisoned at dinner, convulsed before his eyes. The boy who recited Homer now recited horrors. The turning point came not in a palace coup, but in the streets. Rumors swirled of Nero's debaucheries, masked revels where slaves and nobles mingled in equal degradation. He built a private theater, forcing senators to applaud his falsetto arias. Power curdled into paranoia. They plot, he'd mutter, scanning faces at banquets. The empire's machine, its spies, its scribes, its spectacle fed the fear. Informers thrived on whispers. Executions bought silence. By 64, Nero wasn't ruling. He was performing for an audience of ghosts. And then, the fire happened. It erupted on a moonless night, July 18, in the sweltering Circus Maximus. Sparks from a merchant's lamp, perhaps, or a careless torch among the hay bales. Winds howled from the south, whipping flames through the wooden stalls. The blaze leaped like a predator, from the circus's spina to the Palatine slopes, devouring insulae, those rickety apartment hives, where the poor stacked like cordwood. Screams pierced the crackle as families fled, clutching infants, only to find alleys barricaded by fallen beams. The heat warped marble, shattered pottery and shops below. For 6 days, it raged, pausing only when slaves tore down buildings to starve the beast. Then, mysteriously, it flared anew in the Esquiline quarter fanned. Some whispered, by imperial hands clearing land for a grand palace. When the smoke cleared, Rome lay gutted. 10 districts reduced to ash, 3 others scarred, thousands dead, homeless throngs clogging the campus Martius. The emperor was away, lounging in Antium, but returned to a chorus of rage. Nero fiddled, the ballads would say, though his lyre stayed silent. Instead, he opened his gardens, distributed grain from Ostia, even built emergency dormitories. Yet the whispers grew. Why had fire crews been delayed? Why did the blaze spare his properties? Why did it restart just so, carving space for his domus aurea, a golden house to eclipse the gods? Nero needed a scapegoat. Not senators, they held too much sway. Not slaves, they were legion, but blameless in mobs' eyes. His gaze fell on the shadows, the Christians. Hated for their hatred of mankind, their refusal to join civic rights. Tacitus, the senator's son who would chronicle it all, called them a class loathed for their vices, perfect fodder for the flames of rumor. The machine whirred to life. Praetorians swept the Subura's alleys, dragging forth confessors. Under torture racks that stretched limbs, hot irons that seared flesh, names spilled like water. An immense multitude, the chronicles say, not just the guilty, but the guilty by association. Nero decreed spectacles to sate the crowd's bloodlust, turning punishment into theater. In the Vatican gardens, where poplars whispered secrets, stakes rose like grim sentinels. The emperor, cloaked as a charioteer, mingled with the throng, his laughter a counterpoint to the gasps. Enter Aemilia. She was 22, a seamstress's daughter from the Aventine Hill, her hands calloused from needle and thread. Baptized in a Tiber backwater 2 years prior, she wove tunics by day and shared scripture by lamplight. Her faith was quiet fire. No sermons in forums, just bread broken with a widowed neighbor. Songs hummed over colic-struck babes. Aemilia dreamed of a husband, perhaps, or a workshop of her own. Virgin not by vow, but by the grind of survival, Rome offered little time for courtship amid the looms. Her world was wool and wonder. tales of a risen teacher who dined with outcasts, who promised life beyond the pyre. She'd heard the warnings. Keep low, her elder urged at gatherings. The city's eyes are sharp, but faith bound tighter than fear. When the arrests came, it was a neighbor's betrayal torture's cruel gift that led them to her door. Praetorians kicked in the panel at dawn, their hobnails sparking on stone. "The fire," they growled. "You lit it for your Christ." Aemilia blinked in the gloom, her loom half wound with crimson yarn. She gathered her shawl, kissed the icon hidden in the rafters, a crude fish etched in clay. No plea, just a prayer. "Lord, into your hands." The confrontation unfolded in the Tullianum, Rome's dank prison beneath the Capitoline. Fetid air clung like damp wool. Chains rattled from unseen cells. Aemilia stood before the magistrate, a weedy official named Tigellinus Nero's pet spaniel, risen from charioteer to prefect. His eyes raked her, hungry for sport. "Renounce," he offered, voice oily as lamp fuel. "Burn incense to the divine Augustus. Live." Around them, the machine ticked. Scribes scratched accusations, guards fingered scourges. Aemilia met his gaze, her voice steady as a shuttle's click. "I serve one Lord. He was burned first, for love." Tigellinus laughed, a bark that echoed off basalt walls. "Then burn for him. No trial, no appeal. The system demanded display, not justice." Dragged to the gardens at dusk, Aemilia joined a line of the condemned. Elders with trembling knees, youths with defiant stares. Slaves slathered them in pitch, the stench biting like vinegar. Wild dogs strained at leashes, their howls prelude to the main act. Nero arrived in a swirl of silk, Poppaea on his arm, her jewels catching the dying sun like false stars. The demand came as the crowd hushed. "Entertain us," Nero called, gesturing to a cleared ring of sand. "Dance the flames away. Prove your God's mercy." It was the emperor's whim, born of his own stage fever. Humiliation as art. The virgins, among them young women like Aemilia, untouched by the city's brothels, were stripped first, their modesty a mockery to shatter spirits. Naked under torchlight, they stood exposed, the mob's jeers 1,000 needles. Perform or perish slower. Some faltered, bodies curling in shame. Aemilia did not. She raised her arms, not in dance, but prayer, lips moving in silent rhythm to a hymn only she heard. The spark fell. Flames licked upward, slow at first, then ravenous. Aemilia's form blurred in the heat haze, her silhouette a cross against the night. The crowd gasped, then cheered, as light bloomed across the lawns. Nero applauded, oblivious to the pity stirring in the shadows. "Beautiful," he murmured, "like stars fallen to earth." Word spread like embers on wind. By morning, the Subura buzzed, not with triumph, but unease. A baker, who'd lost his shop to the blaze, spat into the dust. They died for nothing, not fire starters, just fools with their fish signs. Slaves whispered in kitchens, merchants in tabernae. The machine faltered, just a cog's slip. Public pity, Tacitus would note, for victims slain not for the state, but one man's sport. This wasn't about Aemilia alone. It was the system's reveal blame as currency, spectacle as control. A brief echo today, crowds baying at scapegoats, leaders lighting torches to distract from their own smoke. But the emperor's hunger grew. The gardens weren't enough. The circus beckoned. Shift now to the overseer's view. Gaius, a grizzled centurion who'd marched from Gaul's mud to Parthia's dust. 20 years under eagles, his scars a map of loyalty. He wasn't a believer, gods were for altars, not alleys, but he'd seen the arrests up close. In the guardhouse off the Via Sacra, he'd collared a dozen. A potter with ink-stained fingers, a midwife clutching her satchel. Why them? He'd muttered to his second, over-sour wine. They harm no one. The reply, orders, sir. The fire gods demand blood. Gaius implemented, not with zeal, but efficiency. The machine's incentives were clear. Promotion for the swift, demotion for the soft. Reports flowed upward, scribes tallying confessions like tax ledgers. 50 today, one noted, quill scratching, 80 tomorrow. Nero's edicts cascaded, no mercy for haters of the human race. From Rome's core, it spread tendrils to Ostia, whispers to Neapolis. Whole insulae emptied, not of flame, but fear. Villages in the Ager Romanus saw families vanish, a blacksmith's clan chained for evening games, their hammers cold. Gaius witnessed the escalation in the Circus Maximus, that vast oval of sand and stone where chariots once blurred the eye. Now crosses lined the Spina, a forest of judgment. Christians arrived in carts, jostling with the condemned, thieves, debtors, the usual fare, but these were different hymns on their lips, eyes fixed on some unseen horizon. One midday, under a sky bruised purple, Gaius oversaw the Virgin's lot, stripped again, not for dance now, but degradation's sake, paraded before the tears, where bets flew on who would break. "Look at them," a spectator jeered, tossing a fig core. Purer than vestals, yet meet for the flames. The act blurred into routine. Dogs first, straining on iron, then nails through palms, the thud of mallets a drumbeat. For the burners, it was methodical, tar slathered, stakes erected in the emperor's private vaults. Gaius turned away once, spotting a girl no older than his daughter, her plea not for life, but witness. "Tell them," she gasped, "we forgive." He nodded, throat tight, and lit the torch himself. Flames roared, but in the quiet after, as smoke curled toward the Capitoline, he wondered, who truly burned here? A breather amid the grind. That same evening, as ash settled like gray snow, Gaius shared a loaf with his men. Simple fare, barley, and olives from a vendor untouched by the purge. Laughter cracked, rare as rain, tales of a Gaulish tavern where wine flowed freer than blood. For a moment, the machine paused, human again. Irony laced the air a Christian baker's stall, spared by whim, now fed the guards who hunted his kin. Yet, the spread accelerated. Incentives greased the wheels. Informers got coin, guards got glory. From urban knots to rural hamlets, the net tightened. Not 1,000 slain historians debate the toll, estimates hovering near 1,000 in Rome alone, but villages hollowed, families fractured. A different victim emerged in the ports, a Syrian trader, bearded and fervent, chained for smuggling seditious scrolls. His end was swifter, flogged in the harbor, body pitched to the waves. No spectacle, just erasure. The system adapted, terror as policy, not performance. Gaius saw the crack first in the ranks, mutters among the ranks. This isn't valor, it's butchery. One night, a young auxiliary slipped a prisoner, bred small rebellion, swiftly crushed, but the seed took. Across the Tiber, in Trastevere's warrens, survivors huddled, their songs softer now, but unbroken. The machine escalated, yet sowed its own unraveling. The climax brewed not in gardens or circuses, but in the Domus Aurea itself, that gilded monstrosity rising from the fire's corpse. A lake for mock naval battles, a 120-foot statue of Nero as soul, golden and looming. The emperor retreated there, lyre in hand, composing dirges for his lost city. But the whispers clawed back, senators plotting in the curia, provincials withholding grain. Poppaea, ever the serpent, urged more. Burn the root, my love, let no seed remain. Slow time now, to that final night in October. The air crisp with autumn's bite, carrying scents of pine from the Vatican groves. Stakes dotted the lawns like accusatory fingers, 200 strong, a record for the machine's appetite. The crowd swelled, plebs with amphorae of cheap wine, equestrians in togas stiff with disdain. Nero arrived late, flushed from rehearsal, his tunic spattered with paint from a mural of Troy's fall. "Begin," he commanded, settling on a dais strewn with rose petals. The condemned filed in, elders first, then families sparing no bonds of blood. The virgins came last, a cluster of 15, ages from bloom to wilt. Stripped in the antechamber, their forms oiled not with pitch alone, but shame's gloss. Guards prodded them forward, into the central ring. "Perform," the cry rose again, now ritual. Nero leaned forward, eyes alight. "Show your gods dance, or let the flames compose it." Time stretched, taut as bowstring. The lead virgin, a girl of 17, hair cropped in mourning, stepped out. Her name lost to ledgers, but her stance eternal. Chin high, feet planted in sand still warm from the day's sun. No quiver, no plea. The mob hushed, sensing the shift. She sang not a dance, but a fragment of psalm, voice clear as a bell over the Aventine. Words of valleys shadowed, yet unafraid. Others joined, voices weaving into harmony. Not mockery, but mercy, a chorus defying the script. Nero's face twisted. Enough. The order snapped like dry tinder. Pitch poured in rivers, glistening on skin. Torches approached, flames dancing mockingly. The first stake ignited at the edge. An elder's form silhouetted, his prayer a murmur against the whoosh. Then, the circle. One by one, the virgins kindled. Heat warped the air, carrying cries that pierced not the ears, but the soul. Short, sharp, then silence. The lead girl's flame rose highest, her silhouette holding shape longest, arms outstretched as if embracing the light. The crowd recoiled, not cheers, but a collective inhale. A senator retched into the bushes. A matron clutched her pearls, whispering, "Monsters, all." Pity bloomed, wild as the fire itself. This was the breaking, not the victim's flesh yielding, but the system's facade. Nero fled the dais, liar forgotten, as guards hustled the rest to crosses under moonless sky. The machine had overreached, turning spectacle to slaughter, vengeance to vanity. In the aftermath's hush, survivors slipped into catacombs, their faith not ashes, but embers. Gaius, witnessing from the perimeter, unclasped his helmet. "It's done," he told his second, voice hollow. But nothing was. The crack widened, reports of desertions, senators penning indictments. Nero's paranoia peaked, poisonings in the palace, suicides staged as loyalty. By spring 65, the Pisonian conspiracy erupted. Senators, knights, even a Praetorian, plotting the blade. Foiled, Nero's retribution was frenzy. Gardens emptied of more than flames, the Colosseum's precursor stained red. The emperor's fate sealed itself. In 68, as Gaul and Spain revolted, Nero fled Rome, cornered near a villa in the marshes. "What an artist dies in me," he wailed, thrusting a dagger into his throat aid from a secretary's blade. The purple passed to Galba, then chaos. A year of 4 emperors, legions carving the throne in blood. The Domus Aurea crumbled under Vitellius's neglect, its lake drained for an amphitheater, the Flavian one, where gladiators would one day roar. Survivors scattered. Christian enclaves in Ostia rebuilt, their gatherings fiercer, forged in fire. The faith, meant for erasure, spread to Antioch, Alexandria, beyond the Alps. Rome's machine shifted. Emperors like Trajan would query Pliny on this sect, but the blueprint endured. Long term, the irony bit deepest. Nero's scapegoats birthed a religion that would claim his city. Constantine's edict in 313, baptizing the empire under a Christian cross. The pyres that lit Nero's nights now illuminated basilicas. What of Aemilia's kin? Whispers in the catacombs named her saint, though records fade. Families like hers wove resilience, coded symbols in frescoes, bread shared in defiance. Power shifted, but the lesson lingered. Tyrants fall, but systems evolve. Centuries buried the embers, but not forever. In the 19th century, amid Rome's fevered digs, archaeologist Rodolfo Lanciani sifted the Palatine's ruins. A stooped figure with a miner's lamp and endless patience, he'd mapped the forum's ghosts. In 1870, near the Circus Maximus's curve, his spade struck not marble, but ash layers black, sterile bands marking the 64 blaze. Pottery shards, warped by heat, coins melted to lumps, stamped with Nero's stern profile. Further digs revealed the insulae's bones, timber char, collapsed hearths where families once supped. Lanciani's find was no treasure hoard, but proof tangible, the fire's scar, etched in soil. Later, in the 1,990 seconds, teams from Sapienza University peeled back the Vatican Gardens lawns, stakes as sockets, faint in the earth, amphorae bases slick with pitch residue. No bones, looters, and time claimed them, but the layout screamed spectacle, a ring for the ring of flames. In 2015, carbon dating pinned the strata, summer 64, winds from the southeast, just as Tacitus described. These weren't relics for museums alone. They humanized the horror. Lanciani, poring over sketches by lamplight, saw not data, but lives. A child's toy, fused in the melt, a loom weight like Amelia's. The fire didn't just burn buildings, he wrote in his journals. It burned the possible. Modern eyes followed. In labs, spectrometers traced the blaze's path. Debunking myths of Nero's fiddle, he was miles away. Yet, confirming the pivot, Christian graves nearby, etched with anchors of hope, dated post-6-4. The machine's victims, etched in stone. Why does this echo now? Not in emperors' palaces, but subtler halls. Boardrooms where blame cascades downward, mobs online torching the other to light a leader's stage. The Neronian script replays scapegoats for crises, spectacle over substance, power's temptation. When cornered, ignite the innocent. Yet Aemilia's stand teaches counter, resistance not in swords, but songs. Human nature bends toward the flame, but also the ember faith that warms without consuming. In an age of viral fires, this warns, systems don't break themselves, we must. Return to that garden's edge, the flames have died, stakes charred husks under dawn's gray veil. Where Aemilia stood, a sapling pushes through ash, twisted, but green. The crowd disperses, heads bowed, carrying not cheers, but questions. They were meant to vanish oiled rags in the emperor's play, but they didn't. Their light pierced the night, not as torches, but beacons. In catacomb prayers, in edicts of Milan, in the basilicas that crown the hills today. Scribes like Tacitus preserved their pity. Diggers like Lanciani unearthed their ground. And now they're here with you because you chose to listen, to let their silence speak. If this story stirred something of defiance, a doubt, share one word in the comments below. Ember, what flame do you refuse to dance for? Your voice keeps the tale alive.